Nora, suspecting her husband Carl's affair, broke into his cabinet, uncovering incriminating receipts and an American Express bill. She was devastated to find concrete evidence that he was buying someone else flowers and jewelry. Now, in the somewhat fictionalized novel that followed the trauma, Nora's character finds out about the affair by way of an inscription in a book of children's songs. The someone else was Margaret J., a tall, blonde, 39-year-old former BBC producer, the daughter of former British Prime Minister James Callaghan. She confronted Carl. He confessed. They stayed together. The relationship was far from okay, however. Case in point, there was a dinner with close friends. Nora proceeded to pour an entire bottle of red wine over Carl's head. He sat there, motionless, as the red wine cascaded. When the bottle was finally empty, they decided it was time to leave the party. Shortly thereafter, she decided it was time to leave altogether. The scene was a foreshadowing of the novel. Of course, in both the movie and the book, the red wine was swapped for key lime pie. The statement was nevertheless undeniable. It was over. Now, distraught, Nora went into early labor. Thus, Max was born 2 months premature on November 16, 1979. 2 months following the birth of their second son, Nora and Carl announced that they were divorcing. Nora asked her friend Liz Smith to run the story in her gossip column. Now, Smith later said that she felt sick writing the scoop, adding that she'd confronted Nora about rumors that Carl had resumed his swinging ways. For Nora, the revelation of the divorce, as well as his infidelities in the gossip column, were a way to make it real. It was a way to make sure that she would never be able to take him back. So, just before Christmas of 1979, Nora packed her belongings, bundled up Jacob and Max, and left Washington, D.C. Her destination was home, New York City. They initially moved in with her father, but soon moved in with her editor and friend, Robert Gottlieb, and his wife, Maria. Now, inspired by the circumstances she had been forced to suffer and also needing a way to process and deal with it, she began exploring ways to write about it. Conclusion: a novel would allow her to vent her frustrations. Now, being realistic about her chances of having the novel published, however, she also understood that a novel wouldn't pay the bills. So, using her connections and the experience she gained writing with Carl, she took the leap from journalism to screenwriting. As a single mother of two with no money, screenwriting made much more sense, as it didn't demand the traveling and the interviewing time that journalism did. And once she landed a few screenwriting assignments, she began working on what would become Heartburn. She later recalled sitting by the typewriter in Bridgehampton in the house she and Carl still shared, alternating use of the place. Now, she was supposed to be writing a screenplay. However, there was something distracting her. Something furious needed to come out. When she first allowed the words to flow, 16 pages accumulated in 2 days. Immediately, she realized her search was over. Now, despite being in a state of misery and torment, she also saw the humor in the word spillage. It was too horrible and too ridiculous to not be humorous. Like Nora's mother once said to her when she was younger and came home after a bad experience, everything is copy, meaning everything is material if applied in the right way. She refused to play the victim, however, in her version of what transpired. So within Heartburn, she changed the direction and tone of the plot. Friend and director Mike Nichols would note how much Nora cried for the 6 months she lived with the Gottliebs. And through the tears, she continued to write her powerful and funny book. She chose the name Heartburn and punctuated it with recipes, adding to the humor. And during the writing, she took back much of what she'd lost. coming out feeling victorious and vindicated on the other side. Soon, the novel would become a lifeline for women and men piecing themselves back together after betrayal. Well, Nora soon found publication. The novel was out and on the rise. However, what she was feeling didn't instantly improve. In public, she put on a brave face. Privately, she was embarrassed, heartbroken. Still, releasing the story was vital. It wasn't only a way to exorcise her demons, it was also a sort of vindication for her mother and her grandmother. You see, both women, mom and grandma, stayed with their prospective husbands when they should have left them. Unfortunately, they lacked the strength to go through with it. Now, published in 1983, Heartburn was considered controversial, occasionally even denounced as tasteless. Carl certainly felt that way. He greeted the news of a movie deal by lawyering up. In the end, he pretty much received what he wanted, which was, above all, joint custody of his boys and to be portrayed at all times as a caring, loving, and conscientious father. In other words, if Nora wanted a divorce, she needed to make some changes to Heartburn, which she did. Mike Nichols and Paramount, interested in making the movie, also made concessions. In the film, Carl not only demanded that he be portrayed as a dutiful and loving father, but also insisted that his kids not be portrayed. If they were to be depicted, they would be shown as females. His real children were not to be allowed to attend any publicity event for the film. Additionally, Nora was prohibited from ever writing about them. She agreed to those terms. But after more than 5 years of often bitter and, of course, expensive negotiations, Carl and Nora were finally divorced. Heartburn, a work of more or less fiction, was ready to shoot. She was forced to make compromises, but it would soon pay off as the novel became a bestseller and later a classic.